Welcome to Valente Brothers TV. From our headquarters in North Miami Beach, we're back with a segment of our channel that we haven't done in quite some time. Of course, now we have our podcast. We took advantage of the time that Joaquim, our youngest brother, Joaquim Valente, he traveled for a trip to teach Jiu-Jitsu. So we decided to bring back this talk that we had many times. If you haven't seen it before, we invite you to check some of our oldest videos in our YouTube channel, Valente Brothers TV. And we're here today to talk about the philosophy of Jiu-Jitsu. Actually, some of the most popular videos of these talks were in regards to our philosophy. We had our latest podcast where we also offered maybe some ideas of how to use Jiu-Jitsu, the essence of Jiu-Jitsu, in our daily lives and help us with so many of the problems that we see today. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to discuss a little bit more about this important topic. Pedro, we see so much negativity today around us. I think through so many of the problems that we observe today in society. Social media maybe became a huge outlet for that. What is the reason for that, and how can we work? I think it's something that requires work. All of us need to work on it to correct this grave mistake.
Pain and suffering. People are hurting inside. When you attack, when you're upset, when you're angry, when you have a need to criticize others, it's usually because you are not well. People who are well, people who are at ease, they tend to mind their own business and to look at life in a positive manner. When you start looking at life in a negative way and looking for problems and mistakes in others, you're trying to somehow affirm yourself. As Yoda said in the Star Wars movies, fear is the source of suffering, right? Because fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. So how do we eliminate fear so that we can eliminate suffering? How, or at least minimize suffering? You can't eliminate suffering, but minimize suffering so that people can feel better and become more constructive in society. And I think the first step is to inspire people to eliminate self-destructive habits. When you engage in self-destructive habits, habits that will destroy your wellness, be it physical wellness, mental wellness, or spiritual wellness, then you are hurting yourself. And in hurting yourself, you destroy your self-esteem and your self-confidence. And your physical health also deteriorates. And those are ingredients that lead to more pain, to more suffering. And people don't even realize the source, the cause, the root of that suffering. So I think in the philosophy of Jiu-Jitsu, and I think that's something that we benefited so much from since our childhood, was learning not to engage in self-destructive habits. All of us do to a certain extent, but we must always be vigilant. We must always try to identify self-destructive habits in our lives so that we can remedy them, so that we can transform, so that we can change, so that we can stop.
But we had a discussion, and even at a moment in our latest podcast where we debated the importance of sometimes pointing out problems we see in certain things. Pointing out problems. And I remember you said that that's very dangerous sometimes if you just like to point the finger at different situations, or it's something that you see wrong without first making sure that you understand that situation, right? And maybe also analyzing yourself.
But we agree that evil must be exposed. And it's important that we have the courage to point out actions that are destructive.
But sometimes maybe don't we rush to judge? Don't we judge too easily?
100%. And most importantly, we're not willing to listen. Everyone wants to speak, but no one is actually willing to hear what the other side has to say. So that's the expression constructive criticism. Whenever you're going to criticize, and criticizing is something that is very dangerous. I agree with you. You cannot just criticize too quickly. Think before you speak. And make sure that your criticism is necessary and that your criticism is going to achieve something positive. Because if you're just criticizing for the sake of criticizing, then you might as well not do it.
Well, but maybe this type of approach, sometimes people say, you know, you're trying to be always too nice. You're trying to always, it's almost like you live in a fantasy world, a philosophy, teaching lessons. The truth, according to some people, is that the nice guy finishes last.
Finishes last in what? Right? We are addicted in our society to always look at the short term. What's happening right now? Immediate gratification. In Asia, if you look at Asian philosophy, Asian cultures, they have an approach that is more to look at the long term.
I would say even Western organizations, the oldest organizations, for example, the military has been around for how long? Even if you look at religion, as far as an organization, has been around for how long? And those seem to plan for the future.
But they might be the exception, right? I think that in our current age, most people are always looking at who's gonna have the advantage right now. And when you say, the nice guy always finishes last.
I don't say it,
sure.
but it's often said.
When you just mentioned that. Finishes last in what?
Well, but some people say they feel compelled many times to say, don't confuse my kindness with weakness. And we see this a lot.
Having to say that is insecurity. Why do you have to say that?
Well, coming from a jiu-jitsu perspective, at least our Brazilian lineage, a lot of people like to say that the old school guys were tough, and today there's a lot of softness, weakness. They mentioned how in the old days, our teacher, he was always very rough with his students, and how students were beaten up, and that's how they toughened up.
First of all, that didn't happen in the early days of jiu-jitsu.
In our lineage, with our teachers.
If you look at, yes, and even before, if you look at how the Japanese were introducing jiu-jitsu in the West originally, and obviously you have different teachers doing different things. However, if you look at those who first brought jiu-jitsu to the West, they were intellectual, right? They were teaching the President of the United States. Can you imagine that the approach was rough and violent? Obviously it was. It was a refined, sophisticated approach. We both were privileged to train under Grandmaster Hélio Gracie. And we understood how gentle he was with his students.
Yeah, that's why I actually brought this up, because when I hear that, when I see that, as you said, there are different teachers doing different things. But the Hélio Gracie that I met, that our dad met, so traveling through the generations of students, was not one of beating up the students, of mistreating students.
That was always considered by him, this type of behavior, teachers who acted in that way, he considered them to be cowards. That's what he said. It's a cowardly behavior to take a white belt, to take a new student and rough him up and beat him up.
Well, but what if that student misbehaves?
Well, you should approach it in a psychological manner. You should, what's your intention? To help the student or to break the student?
Is to educate.
To educate.
Are you going to punish the student? He comes to your school to learn. And because he doesn't know, you're going to punish him. It makes no sense. But I think it's important for us to mention it, because We can always talk about jiu-jitsu issues and talk about issues off the mat, and they often share many similarities. We can assume that this is a result of ignorance, especially when it comes to the philosophy of jiu-jitsu, the essence of jiu-jitsu today. Some people might say, you know what, this is all boring. I just want to learn how to punch. I just learn how to kick, how to do arm locks, how to do chokes, and that's it. Who cares about this philosophy? This is just somebody trying to teach us maybe being a guru. Are you a guru?
No. And I don't want anyone to follow me.
Even though some arts have that name, and no disrespect to the term guru.
But the guru term usually means that people are just going to follow you blindly. And I don't believe in that.
Yes, that's a misconception, even in our lineage again.
We try to inspire our students to learn.
And to ask questions.
I
think that's one of
our... to find their own path.
That's one of our most important flags, I think, that we carry, is something we learned from our teachers, from our father, who was considered possibly by some to be a rebel, and Hélio Gracie too, in many ways. You don't just accept things, impositions, is that the right word? Blindly. I think one of the reasons why we learn jiu-jitsu and we develop confidence is so that we're not prisoners, physically, mentally, and emotionally.
So we can have the freedom to live life the way we choose to live life.
Correct.
And we want our students to develop the confidence necessary to be able to be free and to feel free and to make the decisions that they feel are best
but that
for their
comes
lives.
that comes with knowledge.
Yes.
Because without knowledge, you're just like a very young child putting on a tantrum. Yeah, I want this, I want that. That's not good.
Knowledge
That's
and confidence. Because when you mention instructors who say, back in the day it was better, back in the day people were tougher, now everyone is soft. That's an expression. We must have empathy for people who,
of course,
act this way. Because that means that they're not happy with their lives. They need to keep going back to something that happened 20 years ago.
It's nostalgia.
And it's an imaginary reality. They create this idea that back in the day, this and that. For example,
I miss the old days.
Me too.
We all miss the old days.
But I'm very happy with everything that's happening today.
Living the moment.
One of the most powerful lessons that I learned from being around Hélio Gracie so much, a man who achieved so many amazing things in his youth. He lived an incredible life.
Yeah.
It was difficult to get him to speak about the past.
That's
I
true.
love history, and I would constantly try to talk to him about his fights, and he would ask me, Pedro, why do you care about what happened in the past? Let's focus on the present. What are we going to do now? He was excited about the school. He was excited about the lessons. He was excited about his seminars. And I never heard him say these things, oh, back in the day it was better, when I was now things. No. He might have been critical of many things and things that he didn't like and things that he didn't agree with. And always in a constructive way, trying to, because sometimes you might see mistakes in order for you not to repeat them. And that's okay.
You learn from them.
You learn from them. But whenever you put yourself in a position to point a finger at others, something I learned, whenever you point your finger at someone, there are 3 other fingers pointing back at you. Right? You point one finger this way, there are 3 coming back in this direction. So it's usually about what's happening inside. And we must always cultivate our inner peace, our inner self. We must constantly look at our lives, as I said, trying to eliminate self-destructive habits so that we can become better and so that we can look at life in a more positive way. Obviously, doesn't mean that we're not going to be prepared. We don't want to be naive, and that's the difference. We don't want to be naive, but we can't live life in fear of being taken advantage of. I hear people say this, be careful with helping people because they might take advantage of you. No, you should always help.
That's usually because you're not helping. Well, who am I to judge? But I believe, because maybe that has crossed my mind too. And meditating, trying to understand the real purpose of helping someone, often the nature, maybe the root of this feeling is based on your expectation. You're not just helping for the sake of helping, with that pure feeling of just giving. You're thinking about what am I getting in return? And that's the problem. Now, it's not easy. I think we're humans. We have our own challenges that we have to overcome. But help without expecting anything in return.
And understand that by helping,
I think that's the true essence of charity.
correct, by helping, you should help for the sake of helping and thinking about the person you're helping. But the way nature works, the way life works, you're going to benefit
Tremendously.
many times more than the person who you're helping. Our father always said, right, if the selfish person understood the advantages of being unselfish, they would be unselfish for selfish reasons. Obviously, we don't advocate that you are unselfish for selfish reasons, but even if you're selfish, it still pays off to be unselfish.
To help. To end this talk, I'm going to test you. As usually all of our talks, our podcasts are improvised. Carlos Gracie, he really studied an author that I know you have studied as well. And I think one of his, in his commandments, right?
12 commandments.
In the 12 commandments.
The Optimist Creed.
One of them by
Christian D. Larson.
And do you remember the one that he mentioned? I don't know if you remember it word by word, but it was a great advice.
Spend as much time. See, I can read his mind. We're so close that I already know what he's talking about. That's the one, right?
Yeah.
Spend as much time taking care of yourself, and I'm paraphrasing here. Spend as much time taking care of yourself so you have no time to criticize others.
And I think that's
the point.
The essence of this conversation.
And it's not just about time, because I think the message of Christian D. Larson is exactly that. The more you spend time, the more you take care of yourself, the less you're going to need, the less you're not going to have the desire, the necessity to criticize the others. Because criticizing others, when you're always on the internet criticizing people, and that's because you're not spending.
I think the internet is just one of the outlets, but in life in general, in relationships,
it's because you're not spending enough time taking care of yourself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, to like our videos, and to turn on the notification bell. Thank you, and see you soon.